Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. You're in for a special treat. This will be a terrific lecture tonight. This is the penultimate, for those of you who don't have a dictionary handy, that means the next to the last lecture in the Randall Corman Facade series. Randall's going to introduce the speaker tonight, and he's going to talk about the lecture for next week. It's been an incredible series. These last two will be a terrific way to end. Just want to thank you all for coming, and I'm going to do nothing more than introduce Professor Randall Corman, who's going to introduce the guest. So give him a hand.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for coming out tonight. As Dean Speaks indicated, next week will be the next and final lecture in the series. It will be 1 week exactly from tonight, but not in this building. We will again return to Grant Auditorium over at the Falk School on the other side of campus for that lecture, and that will be Daniel Libeskind from Libeskind Studio. So I highly recommend you put that into your respective calendars. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight. I have been aware of the work of Ensamble Studio for a number of years. Specifically, it was two projects, the SGAE headquarters and the Music Study Center in Santiago de Compostela, which got my attention. In both cases, it was the rough cut and undressed quarried stone that produced a dramatically unconventional but memorable facades. A few months ago, while on a trip to Boston, I had the opportunity to meet with our speaker tonight, with Débora, and discuss with her the unique international practice that is Ensamble Studio. And I'm hoping that tonight she will give you some insight into not only the work that they do, but how they do it. They have two offices, two occupational centers. One of them is in Madrid and one of them is in Boston. And they manage to operate across several time zones as they do this. And they do it in a very interesting sort of way. Ensamble Studio is a cross-functional team founded in 2000 and led by the architects Antón, García-Abril, and Débora Mesa. Their office balances education, research, and practice while exploring innovative approaches to architectural and urban spaces and the technologies that make them possible. Among the studio's most compelling completed works are the Hemeroscopium, did I get that right? Hemeroscopium house, and the Reader's House in Madrid, the Music Study Center and SGAE headquarters in Santiago de Compostela, the Truffle house in Costa de Morte, Spain, and most recently the Cyclopean house, their own house and office in Brookline, Massachusetts. I had the chance to visit that house, and Débora gave me a tour and an explanation of its construction, and it's remarkable. I hope you're going to maybe touch upon that tonight too. Good. Excursions into landscape installations have resulted in the striking structures of the landscape for the Tippet Rise Art Center in Montana, an extraordinary project. Their work is extensively published and both printed and digital media, exhibited worldwide at notable venues such as the Bi-City Biennale of Urbanism and Architecture in 2013 in Shenzhen, the Venice Architecture Biennale in 2010 and again in 2016, and the Chicago Architecture Biennale in 2017, just to name a few. Ensamble Studio has been awarded several international prizes, including Architectural Record Design Vanguard Prize in 2005, the Rice Design Alliance Prize in 2009, giving to emerging practices, the NCSEA Excellence in Structural Engineering Award in 2016, and the Architizer A+ Award in 2017, among just a few. Beside their professional career, both principals maintain an active research and academic agenda. Both Débora and Antón have been invited professors and lecturers at numerous universities and architectural forums. They were the designated curators of Spainlab, the Spanish Pavilion at the Venice Architecture Biennale in 2012. That same year, they founded the POPlab which is an acronym for, that's the POPlab, the acronym for Prototypes of Prefabrication Research Laboratory at MIT, which they continue to direct. Antón García-Abril is a licensed architect in Spain and a registered architect in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He received his PhD from the Polytechnic University of Madrid. In 1996, he received the Spanish Academy Research Prize at Rome. Since 2012, he has been a full professor at the School of Architecture and Planning at MIT. He has previously taught at the Polytechnic University of Madrid and has been invited professor at a number of institutions, including Harvard, Cornell, and the University of Texas, among others. Débora Mesa is a licensed architect in Spain, having completed her professional studies at the Polytechnic University of Madrid. She joined Ensamble Studio in 2003 and became partner in 2010, after playing a major role in the realization of numerous projects and works. She is currently teaching at Pratt Institute in New York and has been a visiting professor at the Cooper Union, MIT, Cornell University, and a teaching advisor at the Polytechnic University of Madrid in 2009 and 2010 while she was completing her doctoral studies. Since 2013, she has been a research scientist at MIT while maintaining an active practice out of her home in Brookline, Massachusetts. I don't know how they do it all, but they do, so please join me in welcoming Débora Mesa.
Thank you very much, Randall, for the invitation to this lecture series. Thank you for the school for receiving me and welcoming me so well. And I'm very happy to be here. I just learned that it's a very special year for Randall after many years of dedication to education and to this institution. So it's especially moving to have been invited to this series that wants to drive the focus to the phenomenon of the facade. And I have to say that we never talk about or work from the perspective of the facade, so this is a bit challenging for me, but I will, of course it's part of the architecture and I will bring my attention to it. But in our practice, I cannot but put the focus in the process of construction and the process of making architecture that integrates, of course, the facade, but all these other elements that make real good architecture. And so I'll be structuring the lecture as an itinerary through a series of projects, some of them more contextual or rooted to context that determine many parts of the architecture, like the early projects of the practice that also Randall was mentioning, which are built in the historic city of Santiago de Compostela. Other projects, like our houses that have a context. Sometimes it's a context that is not dictating the architecture too much, so we are very free to experiment, and we actually use this smaller scale to experiment and prototype and think about aspects about technology or space or structure that we want to after scale up. And I will end up the talk going to the landscape and how we operate in very raw landscapes. So we are Spanish architects, like Marcos Parga here, and this means that when we graduate, we have a license to build, and Spain has produced amazing architecture, amazing possibilities for young architects to practice through a competition system. And some of the early projects of the practice came out of those opportunities. And here are two of the early projects, the Music Studies Center here, and this is the SGAE headquarters. 2 buildings in the same site, designed in different years. One was completed, this one in the middle of the property was completed in 2003, and the other one was completed in 2008. And they are in this garden very close by to the historic center of the city of Santiago, which was actually designed by Arata Isozaki, the master plan of the garden. But if you've been to Santiago de Compostela, it's a city built mainly with stone, amazing examples of architecture and history and how architecture adapts to different periods of history, amazing facades built with stone. And in these 2 projects that I'm going to show, that are very close by to the historic center, building with stone was mandatory. So it was a departing point. And we didn't have much idea on how to build with stone. Of course, we had amazing examples, amazing references that we were learning from in the city, really close by. This is the Cathedral of Santiago. But then we also had, this is what industry was offering us to build contemporary architecture with, that of course did not satisfy us very much. Because coming out of university, this is what we learned. These are the examples that moved us to be architects and to operate as architects. And also in the history of that region of Galicia, there's the architecture of the city, but there is also a lot of the remains of Neolithic architectures that build with stone in a very basic, direct way. An understanding of the technologies and the processes that are going to make our ideas come true. So visiting these sites was very important for both projects. In this first project, I arrived to the office when it was almost being completed, and you can see that both projects have a completely different situation in the site. One is in the center of the garden, the other one belongs to the boundary. For this building here, the Music Studies Center, the exercise that the competition proposed was to replicate the exact volume of the neighbor building. It's a cube. And the other condition was to be built in stone. So with that departing point and the visits to the quarry, the idea here is to use the material in a raw way, so taking the blocks of the quarry and cutting them and using actually the rough side of that cut to be the expression of the building. So you can see the stone wall in the perimeter that wants to build not just a skin, but it wants to become the structure of all that facade. And then how that technical solution is directly worked with the quarry people to try to get from them the blocks of the stone from the very early stage of the manufacturing process. No? And this was actually a very difficult moment. We were asking them to do less work, but that was a challenge, no, already. They couldn't understand that we wanted to use like the wrong side of the stone to actually be the finish. But after some of the conversations, this is how the building sets in the garden. It's almost like a rock itself, very massive. The perforations that happen express the kind of programs. It's a music school, so it needs a big mass to operate acoustically, but then it opens up in the moments of entrance into the building and working with the topography to generate other kinds of access also into it. And there is a contrast between the exterior that refers to those landscapes, to the roughness of nature, versus the treatment of the interior that is a more domesticated stone. It's polished, smooth. It is talking about a different kind of space. It wants the light to smoothly travel through the surface versus create a more dramatic reaction like we could see in the exterior. And this is a bit of the detail of how the technical solution of the facade, which was also another challenge. The idea was to build a wall that would be load-bearing, and we thought that was an evident way to go, but it was actually very difficult to get the contractor and get the quarry people to understand that that was a proper use of the stone versus creating more of a cladding solution. The second building is the SGAE headquarters. After having worked in this property for a while, there was in this master plan from Arata Sasaki, there was an empty plot, and this project did not come out of a competition, but came out of a willingness to do the project. We developed it in the office, we presented it to the mayor, and brought a client in, and we were able to develop it. We were familiar already with the different agents, and we took this opportunity to propose this project. And here, I think this is, for me, my birth into architecture. When I entered the office, this was one of the first projects I started to work on. And when I licensed, we started the construction. And so I was able to follow this project from the very beginning to the last minute. And it was really a very important itinerary to learn from. No? So you can see the building, how it sits in the wall of the property, and the building itself becomes a wall or a conversation between walls. There's a wall that faces the garden that has, again, by code has to be built with the stone, but also takes this opportunity to create a wall that faces the garden that also brings in a way a landscape component into it. And then there is another wall that is facing the street, and the program, which is an office program and educational program, happens in between. We go back to the quarry. The quarry owner already knew the office. We've already tried to push them, and here we were really pushing them. We were looking at these materials here. In this new building, we are the architects and we are the contractors, so controlling all the process, controlling the budget, controlling the different situations becomes critical. And we asked the quarry owner how much was this material, this spare material worth, and he said nothing. So because you can see they're very regular blocks, they're not useful to be cut into very precise forms. So we decided to use this material and use it to build a structural wall that would look into the garden. And Today we would have gone with our iPhones, we would have scanned all the stones, we would have done a super precise, perfectly engineered facade. It would have been amazing, no? But back then we had to improvise the design, fix a series of variables regarding the, map a little bit the dimensions of the stones that we had seen in the quarry and try to work with the model that has become our best ally when thinking how could we build a wall with all that spare material. So we did what we could in the office. We presented the project to the client, to the city. We got the permits, and because we were the contractors, we didn't need to convince any contractor to build that wall, which would have been another adventure in itself. But it was fundamental to make some tests in the quarry to figure out how to put these stones together. It's not something that we had done before, and the site is a very sensible site. It's a garden. By then it was already built. All the buildings were there, amazing fruit trees, very busy street, so it was important that this part of the project, which was the stone wall, to resolve all the uncertainties on the quarry. So again, we tried to convince the quarry people to leave us a section of the quarry to start just doing some small tests, and we started testing. Business to be working in, but it was the perfect setting to not only build a whole wall that finally we got our way to build it all there, but to then test it structurally, because it was very difficult to engineer it properly except the old way. So once it was all assembled, we disassembled it, all the pieces, and we transported it to the site. And this idea of prototyping, of resolving the uncertainties of the project, or doing part of the research through building one-to-one scale mock-ups, sometimes entire elements of the construction, is something that you will see coming in the different projects, but that started somehow here. So here you can see this stone wall that brings the scale of the quarry and also these forms that belong to the spare material in the quarry into the garden, into the city of Santiago. The back wall looking into the street, it's more calm, built with glass, which is another kind of stone, but opaque glass, following or giving it some dynamics, following the street. And the building is sitting also in this perimeter wall that we continued, which is the kind of stone of Santiago, they call it, that is giving the identity to all the property, and the building sits on top of that and produces the access through the center, which is the point in the street and the place in the garden that connects with the different paths. I'm also learning from the history of the city of Santiago and other cities in Spain. We created this kind of intermediate space, this dislocation or fragmentation, or the division of the facade into two, to create a portico that would protect and would give a shelter from the rain, which is pretty abundant in the city, and also allow the engagement with that wall. So it is a wall, but it's a wall that you can actually inhabit due to its scale. So this is how we start, and after being builders by necessity in these projects, where we were trying to figure out how to translate the ideas into materials and make them happen, we become builders by love, I would say. And the construction process is something that appears almost from the beginning of all the project. The construction is a moment of almost celebration, I would say, and it's something that many times it's even legible in the final moment of the architecture. Another project that is built in an historic context is the Reader's House in Madrid. This is the transformation of an old slaughterhouse. So we depart from a building that is there. These two were houses where the facade was untouchable, it was protected, and the interior structure as well. This is an amazing building designed by engineers in the beginning of the 20th century, and now all these warehouses have been transformed into different cultural centers in the city. So it's a very nice place to go if you ever visit Madrid. And so this was a competition. The competition was about transforming this into a mediatheque, building a new level. It was about multiplying the given area. So we needed to build a new level in this space. And protecting the facade and the structure, as I was saying. And you can see here already a contrast between thicker structure in the perimeter, the wall that is a structural wall, and a very light steel structure in the middle. And the intervention had to be done mainly in these two sister structures. And the proposal that won the competition, what we did was follow the order of the structure and the order of the facade, and introduce a series of elements, of bridges that would tie both warehouses together and would relate to the rhythm and the order of the previous building, while building a completely different space and structure. So we were adding something new, but we were allowing the two times to be read simultaneously. And in a way, the window becomes the support for, and the form driver actually, for the new structure that is going to be introduced through the window. So this is the diagram that better explains how the space is going to happen. And this is how it actually happened. hustle of the construction and protect the building. In a way like we were doing also in Santiago de Compostela, where we were pre-manufacturing the wall and making this prototype to then be transformed. So this is how the transformation of the space happens. And this is where you can see in a way how important it is for us that the concept and the way that the architecture is built create these magic connections. So this is how the space gets transformed. There's a new level created, new elements, but you can still read the previous architecture, of course now adapted, insulated, and adapted to the new use. And these bridges being supported in the wall. So the intervention to the old facade is pretty minimal. It's about just reinforcing, adding a window that it tries to be as minimal as possible. There is a presence of those bridges. If you look at it carefully, and then there is an intermediate space that has been added in between the warehouses that produces a new access, a new spine into the project, and marks the entrance in both from both sides. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to show 3 houses that we've built for ourselves, and we'll give you an idea also of the projects at larger scale that those houses have provoked. One is the Hemeroscopium house in Madrid, also built with precast concrete technology, which is the technology that we used for the reader's house, but this is actually a project that happens previously to that one. The location is Suburbia in Madrid. It is very anti-urban place in the city, so it's really about creating your own world within each property. The landscape is very beautiful, so the views are very interesting. And this house is about actually creating that world, reinterpreting the typology of the courtyard house to make it not very introvert, but actually incorporate the landscape into the house as well. And so we've got a central space in the house that is in a way organizing everything around it, creating kind of force that organizes the spaces, the structures, frames the landscape. So it's a house that is born from the inside. We are using precast concrete technology. Our arrival to this technology was also quite accidental. After doing the Santiago building, where we were using this spare material, these stones, we happened to visit a precast concrete factory, and we saw these, what they call cemetery of beams. So these are beams that have certain problems in them, and they are just left there to be demolished. So the idea was to actually reuse those. Finally, the precaster didn't allow us to do it, but that was the idea. And these kind of structures that you were also seeing in the previous project, they are mainly, they are standard formworks. They are mainly used for infrastructures, making channels, highways, bridges. And we were in a way appropriating this technology and using it to create the domestic space, to embrace that courtyard that we wanted to build. And you will see how we think with the model So again, once the system is completed, we just need to add a few more elements to enclose it and be able to thermally enclose. And the materials that we use are materials that are very transparent, that actually do not take away the relevance from the main drivers or the main traces of the space of the house. And you can see how this is actually a very emotional house. It's a house where the different elements are in a way exploded and reassembled. And sometimes different elements have different meanings. So the neighbor was very upset because he didn't understand, for example, how could the swimming pool be in the air and not on the ground. And that triggered a whole conversation about the interpretation of the code and how things should look like. And maybe it's the fact that it's difficult to recognize a face, a facade, no? or elements that culturally the neighbor could relate to that made him completely crazy. No? So I was thinking about that maybe this house is going like from here to somewhere like here, or like this kind of disassembly and reassembly of the elements that Picasso was proposing through Cubism, that in a way you have to change your system of reading, which is so very important to understand architecture. How do you read it? But this is a house that actually, you can take a picture like that, but it's a house that you will never see like this. So if you see this picture published, it's actually very fake innovation. It's a house that you see like this, most likely. So maybe it's more like that. And we will go to projects that, by the end of the talk, that maybe are more like that other portrait by Picasso again. So what has inspired the Hemeroscopium house? When we built it, we learned a lot about prefabrication, a lot about how standard elements can come together to produce non-standard or non-repetitive spaces and frameworks, and thinking about systems and how to think about architectures that maybe are not in the beginning linked to their context, but that can actually adapt to a variety of contexts. We developed this Big Bang Tower that where we again propose an explosion of the elements of the structure. It's no longer about a singular core, but multiplication of the cores that allow a different urbanity in the tower. And again, the process is important, the way we think about this process. create a more, almost what we call a column of columns, and that they really start to bring an identity into the enclosure of the building. The second house I will talk about is the Cyclopean house. This is our house in Brookline, the one that Randall got to visit recently. Also learns from the Hemeroscopium house and continues our investigation about prefabrication, about prefabricated elements, but rethinks them completely. So here we have a more dense urban context. This is Brookline. It used to be the suburbia of Boston, but now has become a little bit more dense. So this is how we found actually the place when we decided to move to Brookline. We looked for the cheapest property in this very nice neighborhood that has very good public schools, and this was very important for our family. So we decided to buy this ugly duckling in the neighborhood that nobody wanted because it's very different to what people are used to. But for us, it was actually a very good structure because it is built with cement blocks. So it is pretty resistant. And what we have in front is this one-story boulevards and an amazing park. So with this house, we are exploring, in a way, a system, but we are already making the adaptation to its context, which is already giving us a lot of clues. So first, we just did a small renovation of this one-story garage. We moved there. We spent there 2 years living. We did whatever we could with what we got without demolishing anything. And but in our dreams, it was always expanding the house and growing the house on top. And here there are a lot of variables that coincide. First, we have an existing structure. Yes, it can support something on top of it, but we cannot overload it, so we need to build with something light, unless we want to start spending a lot of money in foundations and reinforcing foundations that we didn't want. And then we are thinking, we had dealt with a local contractor to make the renovation of the house. We didn't want to deal again with a local contractor to build this part of the house, so we decided to become our own builders, and as our team was still in Spain, we decided to build the house in Spain. And all we needed was just something that would add to the more compartmented and more dark space that we had in the lower level, so we just needed a big room, kind of multi-purpose domestic space that would allow during the day different activities. So we sleep here. When I say we, it's not all the kids, it's just I sleep there. And we have our office, me and my partner, we have our office here. We have parties there, we watch TV or movies, or we do our daily lives there, but we also use it for work. And then we have a roof garden. So it's a very simple. You will already recognize some elements that will take you to a Hemeroscopium house, because we're going to prefabricate, so we are taking as much as we can from our experience building that house. So we are keeping these big elements that resolve many things at the same time, because this is going to reduce the number of maneuvers on the site. We are changing, though, the technology that we are building with. If we were using precast concrete, we wouldn't be able to ship it across the Atlantic. So we are making it very light. And By this time, we already have our lab at MIT running, and we are experimenting with these very lightweight construction materials, building with foam, a cubic glue that we call, and moving it with a smart car. We are building other kinds of structures that have tension in them, and we are exploring this technology and pushing it to directions that the code is not going to accept. So we already know that, although we can prove certain things here, whenever we go to the real world, we are going to need to make adjustments. But we are learning, we are testing, and we are doing this very locally in Cambridge, so very close by. And then we develop the project of our house, where again the model is telling us, we are studying through the model the sequence of construction. We are planning everything that needs to be very clear when all the pieces come to the site. And imagine in Madrid with the Hemeroscopium house, I mean, it's a nightmare, but we could have, sent a beam back to the factory if anything had gone wrong. But here we're not going to ship back anything across the Atlantic back to our factory in Madrid. So to get everything. And this video is going to show you my itinerary from these initial research moments, and then you will see how the technology actually gets very much adapted. So this film is almost entirely foam. It has some steel flanges, some steel bars, but that the code for firemen doesn't accept too much explorations into places that are going to be inhabited. So, these structural elements in our factory in Spain get still very very standard, but as they raise the structure for thermal quality. So we're already advancing the technology that we have in Hemeroscopium house, because this is going to perform thermally much better. Actually shipping these elements with the mechanical systems embedded, and if they have any storage or furniture. So then what's also great is that once the elements are brought to the site, the construction assembly happens very So the one-story building is still here. We have not demolished it. We just covered it with a mesh so that we are able to grow plants. And if you were in the review that I was previously, I already confessed I'm a super bad gardener, so I have not managed to make anything growing here, but that's the idea, that we will have a vertical garden growing. And then the space that we built on top is this exploration. The Hemeroscopium house trying to explore or work with the idea of the courtyard house and challenge it. This house is about creating a multi-purpose domestic space that we are testing in ourselves every day. But as you can see, it has a kitchen, it has a working space. All these elements are sitting. It's a sitting space that is also a closet where you can have things. There's a bed that comes out at night. And this is the big window that connects the house to the exterior and makes you feel as if you were in the middle of a garden when you are inside. And actually the system of construction brings from the Hemeroscopium house the kind of massiveness that is very good for thermal efficiency, but is also, in a way, bringing the logic of American construction, the 4x8 module that structures a lot of the housing development, that houses typically with wood construction, but we are applying those logics here that then work very well with other elements that we have to integrate with the system. No? So after doing this house, yes, it is our house, it resolves our daily needs and creates our habitat here in the US, but it was also a way to test the technology and make it available for larger scales. And this is what we are doing now, studying how the same logics of prefabricating almost 90% of the building with very lightweight construction then can be taken to the site and consolidated, not just to create low-rise structures, but also high-rise buildings. No? And we are also applying this idea of the multi-purpose domestic, that is a thick frame that provides the basic infrastructure of a house, all those things that we need for it to operate, the kitchens, the bathrooms, the services, the views, but then the interior can be customized and can be adapted to a variety of needs that could be decided by a developer or by the users themselves. So, thinking this system, the different variations happen from stacking a variety of typologies. So sometimes we get double height apartments, other times it's a single height apartment, and the core remains the same, but then we can have variations by altering the structure and the composition of the facade. And again, especially in larger scale buildings, we try to bring the best of prefabrication, and especially in contexts like Massachusetts, where labor is super expensive, to really try to optimize and try to bring the quality of the architecture for low and income families, and by lowering the price of the construction, we are able to build more interesting architectures and even high-rise typologies that can be affordable. So you can see the different variations, typologies that we are testing. They all are associated with a different spatiality inside. And so far these are sightless buildings, no? That are thinking the space from this frame and from the interior, from the functionality of it, and that would be adapted, as I say, in its different. No, but you can see the resonance with the Cyclopean house, no, and how it serves as a prototype to test, no. I think I'm gonna skip this, and I will go to the last part of the talk, which is about another house, the Truffle house. And it's about a different kind of context. It's no longer an urban setting, but the landscape, and our investigation on how to build in the land with the land. And this house is in Spain, the north of Spain, in Costa la Morte. We are building on a cliff, and we want to build a rock. And the technology that we are going to use is on-site concrete. And we go from super high resolution projects where we need to resolve up to the last bolt when we are prefabricating to what we understand as very low res projects where we control certain variables, but there are others that we don't need to control. And you will see very clearly which are the. So the project itself is almost like a recipe where we script what needs to happen, and then we perform, and we get one result. If we did it another time, we would get another one, almost like when you cook. So we are digging a hole in the ground, we are bringing hay bales from our neighbor, we are casting the space in between, which is going to become the structure and the enclosure of the building, and then we remove the ground, we cut open the window and the door, and we use the neighbor's cow to help us in all this process. So this architecture is really about reorganizing the materials of the site, making the most of them, and then we are adding the concrete as binder of those elements. But it is architecture, but it's also in a way a poem, no, for us about the landscape. And again, because we invest so much time in thinking the process and how everything is going to become. Hey! Go again. exactly how everything is going to happen, and you need to absolutely look at it before it happens. This moment is absolutely liberating. It's just, let's see what has happened. Of course, we do this kind of tests with ourselves. I don't think if we would dare to do it for a client. But it's our way of researching and our way of training, because we are not skilled builders in any kind of craft. We just need to develop the expertise through and the understanding of materials through building. And I hope you are doing that with your projects with your Sometimes I cut the video before the cow appears, and then everybody hears him afterwards. So I just decided to leave it there. But it's a local resource, for sure. And it was also a way of getting the building built, because everybody thought that, okay, yes, they built the house for the cow. This is it's Galicia, where you can still get around with some things, but yeah, we are building in a place where you cannot build. You can build structures for the animals or to keep the tools, to work the land, but you cannot build architecture. So this is our investigation in the land that, once it's built, we frame that view that we were creating. This is actually, the reason of being of this space that is manifested, through this architectural element that suddenly creates a connection and creates a meaning. And then the other element is the door to access the space. But this is what we discover, and we discover how by using this very improvised formwork that is the earth that mixes with the ground, suddenly the concrete becomes a stone. And this was something that was not planned. It's not something that we really know what we were going to get, but in a very effortless way, we get this amazing relation between the architecture that we are building and the land that is supporting it. And this is fundamental research for the project, the last project I'm going to talk about, which is a project we recently built in Montana, here in the US, where the client contacted us to help them think about an art center. I guess that's time out. So they want to build an art center in this amazing, vast land of about 11,000 acres, pure landscape, very raw, and they want to build a place where visitors can get in contact with the land, where they can have outdoor sculpture, when they can have concerts and music. And the challenge is how to make an architecture that allows these to inhabit the place without killing all its amazing value of being so remote and so pure and so rough. So we go to the office, and with the experience that we acquired with the Truffle, we start brainstorming with the model and with the material, using materials that help us think about the land where we're going to build, and of course bringing the context into these experimentations that we are doing, and we develop a series of possibilities and a constellation of structures. We call them structures of landscape, of rooms, outdoor rooms that can populate the land, create the most basic protection and in a way mark a space where people can enjoy the land or enjoy music. And this is a project that we present for amazing clients, and we say that we don't think that a massive building in this context that is about contact with the land is the right thing, and we propose this kind of fragmentation of the building that finds its different positions in the land. So some architectures are kind of sitting on a hill and completing it and creating, this is academia, a space for conversation or for to build a fire, or these more introverted, very protected space. Some of the architectures are very infrastructural. They resolve certain needs on the property, like connecting and spanning through on top of a canyon, or making available underground water and bringing it so that it can be drinkable by the visitors, or providing shades, or building more acoustic, more sophisticated acoustic surfaces that can host concerts. So we got to build 3 of them so far. The first 2 are doors into the landscape. They are the most basic structures. They just mark a meaningful spot on the ranch, and they build a very small shelter and a shade. You have to picture yourself in a place that with a very harsh weather, very extreme cold in the winter, very extreme heat in the summer. So the process of engineering these architectures come from the model. We build a model, we scan it, and then we develop the rest of the engineering. Again, the process of construction is fundamental to the concept and adapted to also the local resources. Here we are casting the structures flat, so that that's the easiest way, the cheapest way, but it's also the way in which we understand these structures are born from the ground. So we are in a way casting the face of the land, the face of the earth, and we are doing it on the site, adapting it to all the local knowledge and bringing local knowledge to enrich the project. And once the concrete has rested, has cured, has hardened, it's when we tilt it up and we put it in its position. So here there's some level of uncertainty because we are operating at a different scale, and it's already a different architecture, and we are looking for textures that we have not explored before, but there's already a training and a level of development and understanding of what we're doing that we have achieved with the Truffle. And you can see how it is a very basic architecture, very basic construction that spans the surface of the ground at some points, or reflects the sky when the surface it's very smooth and casted against plastic. So there is already a very intentional manipulation of the materials we are casting against. And there are structures that are extracted from this ground in a way, and that allow also nature to rest in them and to change them over time. So we envision some transformation of these structures. And inverted portal is similar, except that the construction process or the tilting process is reversed. and the rough surface is going to be exposed in the outside, allowing the seeds and the snow to rest on top. There are certainly shelters, and a very important part of the program was, or the brief was that the architecture could coexist with existing life in the ranch and existing activities. This is grazing land, so there is cattle that helps to maintain the ranch. There's also a lot of wildlife, and these architectures are completely non-bothered by all of that, and they actually welcome. And the last structure that we built, which is bigger, this time we are using a different method to build it because it's more massive. It cannot be moved. So we are, similarly to the Truffle, we are moving the earth around it to build the formwork, and then we will remove it and discover the architecture. that in the case of Domo is performing acoustically. And it's able to host different concerts or shelter from one person to a bigger group. You know, how it transforms through the different seasons. A lot of people, some people that see it in the magazines or published think that it's not architecture. We really are not concerned about categories, whether you want to read it as art or as part of nature or as architecture. It certainly has a massiveness that protects you from the elements, from the weather, and it's a skin that connects in a way to the skin of the land, projects the sound in ways that connect with the users, with the interpreters, and project it into the land. So this for us is maybe the most basic and essential expression of architecture and its context. Thank you very much.
Are you willing to take some questions?
I'm very happy to take questions. I like questions.
So since this a facade lecture, I have a question about part of the facade. Specifically the part where it's exposed between the interior and like the environment. It seems like the projects that like in either the suburb or like rural areas seems to have more elements of like depth of what's going on inside that kind of leads to it, like the one with the stone wall where it's like heavy in some places, or the Truffle where it's like framed formally with like something like informal happening inside. In contrast to like the urban design where it's mostly like curtain walls, for at least for the exposed part. Do you consider like those conditions to be like in the urban area to be like a limitation that you hope to be removed, or do you consider that like something that kind of helps you inform your design, that like kind of is not a limit but is more so a characteristic of the building that needs to be like not shown too much because it's more so habitable, it's more so like living space, like the one where you use the full mental model and the sticker like tower?
I don't know if I understood, but I will answer something, and then if it does not resonate with your question, you can ask back. Or maybe on the subject of facades, maybe Randall can assist me. But I mean, facade is it's not a limitation. It's part of architecture. It's just that depending on the context, depending on the program, depending on the different variables that come into each project, and here I've shown, you know, a whole range of different conditions. It plays one role or another. So sometimes the facade, it's fundamental, like we were seeing in the first projects, and it takes big presence. Others, it becomes broken, diluted, maybe even disappears. No? I'm not a theorist, and I don't pretend to make a theory about my own architecture. Our own practice is about constant exploration, so we don't even get to become experts in a particular typology or a particular technology. But for us, different elements that compose the architecture are integrated, are integral part of the process, and structure is almost what brings the rhythm in every project. It sometimes becomes even the facade, but sometimes it's not, and sometimes the facade is a more elaborate composition of other elements that add to the structure and provides other levels of habitability of the space. Did I answer? So I mean, in the last project that I showed, it's not that we didn't want to build a facade. It's that for us, coming from an urban context, going to Montana, to that wilderness, and also, most importantly, to the client, it was all about getting people in contact with nature, and allowing that interaction, but providing very basic aspect that we sometimes take for granted, but that when you recognize in such a basic structure, then suddenly they take a lot of meaning, like how a massive structure can change the temperature from you being exposed to the sunshine and you being in a shaded space. You would really learn a lot by jumping from one spot to another and realizing what mass does in terms of thermal transfer. So it's very difficult to read in the images. It's very clear when you are there, or the importance of a shade and a protection, of a sense of human scale in a place that is absolutely open and exposed and wild. So these last projects is not about, a very directional or fixed relation with the context, because actually the context is so all over the place, and so rural.
So my question, given that you often work so radically both with materials and construction methods in ways that seem like often challenge both the contractors as well as the material suppliers, I was curious what contrasts you saw working in Spain versus the United States, and how perhaps different people reacted in those different contexts.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, because there was a big shock when we arrived to the US. I think that architects in Spain, we are very privileged, or we have been very privileged, because now we are adopting a lot of the systems, the Anglo-Saxon systems in the education. So, I mean, we are very privileged in one way. We have this very technical education that covers design in a very broad spectrum, so architectural design, but structural design, mechanical systems design, and there's not really a distinction, or there was not a distinction even between urban planner, landscape architect, urban. So I don't have, in my brain, there are not those pigeonholes. I think I have no problem facing different kinds of projects, and that doesn't mean that I have the expertise in all of them, but you are you graduate and you are licensed, and you can build all of these projects. So and more than that, you're responsible for all the consultants. So you don't really have so many consultants in Spain. You might have a mechanical engineer that helps you do final calculations, or a structural engineer, but then you stamp the project, you sign the project, you are responsible. So that changes radically everything, and you are responsible of the budget. You value engineer the project. And this is very challenging, this is very hard in the beginning, but it's an amazing journey, because you need to learn all these things in order to operate. And then we arrived to the US, and for our first project, which was a project for transforming a building in M.I.T, we become design consultants. And this was the worst thing that we could ever experience. So we would be sitting in a table with 25 different consultants, and by the way, a local architect, and we had no authority at all. We were just, giving our opinion on the aesthetics of the project. So we would come with a project that integrated the structure and the mechanicals and everything, and the consultants would be offended because we were invading their territory, no? And we have, it was very difficult to manage, those boundaries because, we come with a mentality, and here the system operates in a completely different, because here everything is structured so that the responsibility is diluted into many parts. So that's not good for architecture, I think. The architecture, in the end, everybody's just worried about their own parcel, and there's not an integration, and that affects everything. It affects the quality of the architecture, it affects the budget for sure, because how are you going to control a budget that it's spread in so many parcels? So the arrival has been very, very hard, but we resist, and we are trying to find our way. And our way is actually, in the Montana project we didn't have that problem, but that's because we were operating as architects, but from a legal point of view we were more seen as artists, and artists have a completely different status. So if you're able to work as artists to do architecture, that's in your contract, that's actually great. But in other projects, what we are trying to do is becoming not just an architecture firm, but becoming what we are, which is a kind of a design-build firm. So we are now finding our way to restructure our company here, and prefabrication in a way gives us an opportunity to integrate design, engineering, construction, and that implies developing partnerships with contractors, developers. So instead of working as a disaggregated team that suddenly happens to work together, we are trying to build that team that is actually very solid, and that does not dilute the responsibility but owns the responsibility without creating what I believe is a chaos. No? So we are resisting. I don't know where that is going to lead us. So far we've built our own house, that's easy. The project in Montana, that because of the nature of the client was also an amazing opportunity. But we would love to build collective housing. That's another scale that involves operating with other variables that we're trying to influence, and let's see where we go.
I can just.
Again, go ahead.
I was wondering, when you were talking about the Montana project, and you were saying how you didn't really want to construct like a very modern building kind of in the landscape because it's very alien to the landscape. I was wondering if basically the opposite is also applicable. Like, do you think something like constructs like the Domo could integrate into a cityscape or like into an urban landscape, or is that kind of alien, or is that too against the concept?
No, I don't mind the alien, and there are projects that I have not shown, but where we are trying to, in a way, bring nature back to the city, and I think that actually the city needs a lot of that, but not, the scale that is very important. No, it's not just a question of bringing the Truffle into the city. It's really understanding what nature means in the city, and maybe the scale is closer to Central Park than closer to the Truffle. But no, I'm not at all against that. I don't associate one kind of technology with I mean, yes, it is associated, the technology, with the place, but of course you can excavate in a city and you can work with land anywhere in the world, because that's how the city exists. No, everything happens on land. It's just that the city typically erases it and transforms it into a flat plane, a tabula rasa, but that there are opportunities to operate with a different sensibility towards geology, topography, and in the city. That would be amazing.
Débora, thank you very much.
Thank you.